Football is a game of passion, pride, and power. Millions watch it every week, cheering for their heroes as they battle it out on the field. But behind the glory and roar of the crowd lies a darker side. Moments when the beautiful game turns deadly. Here are the 5 most horrifying football player deaths ever. Moments that shocked the world and left a permanent scar on the sport. It was June 26, 2003, a night that should have been another proud chapter in Cameroon's football history. The semi-final of the FIFA Confederations Cup was underway in Lyon, France. The crowd roared, the floodlights glowed, and in the middle of it all stood Marc-Vivien Foé, tall, commanding, and seemingly invincible. A warrior for his nation, the heart of Cameroon's midfield. But in the 72nd minute, something happened that silenced the world. Foé, without a single player near him, suddenly collapsed to the ground. No foul, no collision, just a man falling where he stood. For a moment, the crowd thought he had tripped, maybe cramped up, but he didn't move. His eyes stared blankly toward the sky as teammates screamed for help. Medical staff sprinted onto the pitch, desperately fighting against time. For 45 long minutes, doctors worked frantically to bring him back. CPR, oxygen, defibrillators, everything humanly possible was tried. Inside that stadium, thousands of fans waited in stunned silence, watching their hero's life slip away. When the announcement came that Marc-Vivien Foé had died, football itself seemed to stop breathing. He was only 28 years old. The autopsy would later reveal the cause of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a hereditary heart condition that silently kills even the strongest athletes. There were no warning signs, no second chances. The heart that had carried him through years of fierce battles on the field had suddenly betrayed him. What made this tragedy so haunting wasn't just that it happened during a major international match, or that it unfolded live before millions of viewers. It was the way Foé fell alone, unchallenged, as if fate itself had chosen that moment. His teammates were shattered. Opponents stood frozen, tears streaming down their faces. Thierry Henry, playing in the other semi-final that same night, pointed to the sky after scoring, dedicating his goal to Foé. In the days that followed, the football world united in grief. Manchester City retired his number 23 shirt. Lens and Lion withdrew the number 17 in his honor. Streets were renamed after him. Even years later, his name still echoes in the hearts of fans, a symbol of passion, dedication, and the cruel unpredictability of life. Foé wasn't just a player, he was a father, a husband, and a man who played every match with heart, quite literally, until the very end. His widow later revealed that he had been unwell before the game, suffering from stomach problems and exhaustion. But Foé had insisted on playing. Lyon was his second home, and he wanted to perform in front of the fans who had embraced him. Even as his coach tried to substitute him, Foé waved him off, determined to continue. Minutes later, he was gone. He left behind a wife, children, and millions of grieving fans, but also a legacy that transcended sport. His son would later stand on the field before the 2009 Confederations Cup final, speaking briefly but powerfully in memory of his father, a man who gave everything for his country and his dream. Marc-Vivien Foé's death remains one of the most horrifying and heartbreaking moments in football history. It was a brutal reminder that even the strongest hearts can break, and sometimes they do it right in front of the world. It was supposed to be just another Sunday night in Portuguese football. January 25, 2004, Vitória de Guimarães versus Benfica, a normal league fixture, broadcast live to millions across the country. The air was crisp, the crowd loud, and Benfica's young Hungarian striker Miklós Fehér was ready to make an impact. He came on as a substitute in the second half, full of energy, his trademark grin lighting up the field. He even set up the only goal of the match, a perfect assist that seemed to seal a quiet victory for Benfica. But as the game ticked into injury time, something unthinkable happened. The referee raised a yellow card. Fehér smiled, tilted his head down, hands on his knees, and then, suddenly, without warning, he fell backwards. For a few seconds, the world stood still. Players from both teams froze, unsure if it was a prank, a feint, or something worse. Then came the panic. Teammates rushed to him. One lifted his head, another screamed for help. The stadium, moments earlier filled with chants, turned eerily silent as Fehér lay motionless on the wet grass. The medics stormed onto the pitch. CPR began immediately. Players knelt in prayer. Others turned away, tears already streaming down their faces. Benfica's coach, José Antonio Camacho, broke down on the sideline. Cameras continued to roll, the horror unfolding live on national television. For a brief moment, there was hope. The medical team managed to get a response, and as Fehér was stretchered off the field, fans clung to the belief that he would recover. But within hours, the devastating news broke. Miklós Fehér was gone, just 24 years old. The autopsy would later confirm what no one could have predicted: cardiac arrhythmia caused by hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a hidden heart condition that strikes without warning. His heart had simply given out in the middle of the game. It was a cruel, haunting moment. Fehér wasn't just a footballer, he was a symbol of joy, passion, and youthful promise. To watch someone so full of life collapse and never rise again shook the entire world of football. The image of his final smile just seconds before he fell burned itself into history. His death sent shockwaves far beyond Portugal. In the following days, fans filled the stands with flowers, candles, and scarves. Benfica retired his number 29 shirt, ensuring no player would ever wear it again. Rivals put aside differences, and Porto's staff, including José Mourinho, personally paid their respects. At Benfica's Estádio da Luz, thousands came to see his body before it was flown home to Hungary for burial. And even there, the mourning didn't stop. The entire Benfica squad, along with the club's president and manager, traveled to Hungary to honor him, presenting his parents with a league championship medal their son never got to hold. The team dedicated their cup win to his memory. For the rest of that season, every Benfica goal, every cheer, every celebration carried his spirit. Years later, Hungary's national team would return to Lisbon to lay a wreath beside his bust, and on what would have been his 43rd birthday, another tribute was held at the very stadium where his heart stopped. Time passed, but the image never faded. That smile, that collapse, the tears, the disbelief. It was a cold afternoon on December 29, 2007, at Fir Park, home of Motherwell Football Club. The stands were alive with noise, scarves waving, fans bundled up against the Scottish winter. Their captain, Phil O'Donnell, a man who had spent nearly 2 decades earning respect on and off the pitch, was leading from the front, as always, calm, composed, and committed. The match against Dundee United seemed like any other day in the Scottish Premier League. Nothing unusual, nothing foreboding. Motherwell were in control, the game winding toward its end. Then, in a moment no one could have predicted, everything changed. As the fourth official prepared to raise his board for a substitution, O'Donnell began to slow down. He looked pale, unsteady. Just as he was about to be replaced, he staggered and collapsed. For a few seconds, the crowd went silent, the kind of silence that grips an entire stadium when something feels terribly wrong. Players froze in disbelief before rushing toward him. Medics sprinted onto the pitch. The atmosphere turned from routine to panic in an instant. Fans watched in horror as their captain and their hero lay motionless on the turf he had graced for years. Both Motherwell and Dundee United doctors worked desperately to revive him, performing CPR as the crowd prayed, some crying openly in the stands. The minutes stretched on like hours. Then the stretcher came out. As he was carried away to the ambulance, supporters rose to their feet, clapping, whispering his name, hoping he would be okay. But at 5:18 p.m., the news came. Philip O'Donnell had died. He was just 35 years old. The post-mortem revealed heart failure in the left ventricle. The part of the heart that pumps oxygen-rich blood had simply stopped. It was the kind of silent killer no one sees coming, not even in a professional athlete who seemed the picture of fitness. For the Motherwell faithful, it was unbearable. Phil wasn't just their captain, he was one of them. Born in Bellshill, just a few miles away, he'd started with the club as a teenager, scoring in their 1991 Scottish Cup final victory and earning praise for his bravery and spirit. He had gone on to play for Celtic and Sheffield Wednesday before coming home not just to play, but to lead. He was Uncle Phil to his younger teammates, a mentor to many, and the heart of the dressing room. In the days that followed, Scotland mourned. Fans from across the country, even rival clubs, laid scarves, shirts, flowers, and handwritten notes outside Fir Park. Tributes poured in from around the world. The Scottish Premier League postponed Motherwell's next matches out of respect, and even Celtic and Rangers' bitter rivals agreed to delay their derby game to honor him. Across the border, English clubs paid their own tributes. Players wore black armbands. Stadiums fell silent. Everton's James McFadden, once O'Donnell's teammate, scored and pointed toward the sky, eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just Scotland that grieved. Messages came from Spain, from Sevilla, a club that had suffered the same heartbreak months earlier when Antonio Puerta had collapsed and died. Sevilla's director of football sent words of comfort, saying, "We know how terrible this pain is. Our hearts are with Motherwell." For his funeral, thousands gathered at St. Mary's Church in Hamilton. Fans, players, officials, and families united in grief. His teammates carried his coffin, their captain, one final time, as the town fell silent. In the months that followed, Motherwell made sure his legacy would never fade. The club renamed its main stand the Phil O'Donnell Stand, a permanent reminder of the man who gave his all for the badge. His signature was stitched into every player's jersey for the rest of the season, and in 2011, a stainless steel memorial was erected outside the stadium, a place where fans could come to remember. But the tributes didn't end there. On May 25, 2008, Celtic Park hosted a special match in his honor, a celebration of his life as much as a farewell. Former teammates and friends filled the pitch. Legends like Henrik Larsson returned. 60,000 fans filled the stands, singing his name. The match ended 5-1, but the score didn't matter. What mattered was the unity, the love, the shared grief turned into remembrance. Every year since, on December 29th, people walk from Fir Park to Celtic Park, the journey between two of his football homes. It's a walk of respect, of remembrance, and of hope, raising money for heart charities and keeping Phil's memory alive. Even years later, his influence hasn't faded. His nephew, David Clarkson, carried his legacy on the pitch, wearing Phil's number 10 shirt until his own departure, a number that has never been worn again at Motherwell. It was September 1990 at Bootham Crescent, home of York City. The crowd buzzed with energy as the Minstermen faced Lincoln City in what seemed like an ordinary 4th Division match. On the pitch, 25-year-old striker David Longhurst sprinted across the field, doing what he loved most. He was the underdog every fan rooted for, chasing one last dream in the lower leagues of English football. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The ball had moved to the other side of the field. There was no challenge, no foul, no warning. David was standing alone when suddenly he staggered and collapsed. The stadium fell silent. For a few seconds, fans thought maybe he'd tripped. Maybe it was a cramp, but the way he fell, the stillness told a different story. Teammates rushed toward him. The referee waved frantically for the medics. Spectators looked on in horror as the young striker lay motionless on the turf. Within minutes, the ambulance arrived. Paramedics worked desperately to revive him. Players knelt and prayed. Some couldn't even look. He was rushed to the hospital, but he never made it. David John Longhurst was pronounced dead that afternoon. 25 years old, gone in the middle of a match. It was the first time a player had died during a football league game in 63 years. Doctors later confirmed the cause of a rare, undetected heart condition called cardiomyopathy, a disease that silently weakens the heart until it simply stops. To everyone watching, David looked fit and strong, but inside, something deadly had been hiding all along. For the world of lower league football, it was a brutal wake-up call. These weren't millionaire athletes with elite medical teams. They were working-class players giving everything for local pride. And now, one of them had died in front of thousands of horrified fans. News spread fast. On the radio, David's father, Vic, heard the devastating announcement while driving. "We were just sitting there trying to take take it in, he later said. It was devastating. There had been no contact, no warning. It was something you couldn't explain. At first, people assumed it was a heart attack, but the post-mortem revealed a genetic defect no regular checkup could have found. You have to have an ultrasonic scan for these things to show up, Vic explained. David had all the usual examinations, but nothing ever appeared. After his son's death, Vic made it his mission to campaign for better heart screening in sports for every athlete at every level. He warned that more lives could be saved with proper scans. When Fabrice Muamba collapsed in 2012 and survived, Vic's message echoed louder than ever. Doctors and charities pushed for mandatory screenings, citing Italy, where such measures had reduced sudden cardiac deaths by 90%. Yet in England, testing remained optional. For York City, the loss was deeply personal. David wasn't just another signing, he was their spark, their fighter. To honor him, the club renamed one of their stands the David Longhurst Stand, ensuring his name would live on in the place where he gave everything. It was November 11th, 2023 in Albania, when tragedy struck in front of stunned spectators. Raphael Dwamena, a 28-year-old Ghanaian forward known for his electrifying speed and powerful finishing, was representing KF Ignatia in a league match against FK Partizani. The game had barely reached the midway point of the first half when Dwamena suddenly collapsed on the field. One moment, he was sprinting into position, full of life and determination. The next, he was motionless on the grass. Teammates waved frantically for help. The referee halted play. Paramedics rushed in. But despite their desperate efforts, Raphael Dwamena was pronounced dead on the way to the hospital. The cause? Sudden cardiac arrest. For those who knew his story, the news hit like a punch to the gut. Dwamena wasn't just any player. He was a fighter, a man who had stared death in the face before and come back. Years earlier, doctors had discovered a dangerous heart condition that forced him to abandon a dream transfer to the English Premier League. He had even undergone surgery to have an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, an ICD, placed in his chest to regulate his heartbeat. That device once saved his life when he collapsed during a match in Austria. But somewhere along the way, Dwamena made a fateful decision. He had it removed. He wanted to play again, to feel the rush, to hear the crowd, to live the game that had defined his entire existence. Football was in his blood. Even as doctors warned him of the risks, Dwamena pressed on, returning to the pitch with the same passion that carried him from the dusty fields of Ghana to the bright lights of Europe. He had started in the Red Bull Ghana Academy, dazzling scouts with his raw speed and finishing ability. His journey took him to Austria, Switzerland, Spain, and Denmark, a roller coaster career marked by brilliance, heartbreak, and relentless perseverance. He had once been on the brink of Premier League glory. In 2017, Brighton and Hove Albion agreed to sign him from FC Zurich after he scored an astonishing 12 goals in just 18 matches. But during the medical exam, his world shattered. He failed due to a heart abnormality. What should have been his biggest break turned into a nightmare. Still, he refused to let the diagnosis define him. He moved to Levante in Spain's La Liga, then to Zaragoza on loan, and later to clubs in Denmark and Austria. Every time his heart condition returned to haunt him. He stepped away, and every time he came back, determined to reclaim his place on the field. His life was a battle between passion and mortality. In 2021, while playing in Austria, he collapsed mid-match but was revived when his ICD shocked his heart back to rhythm. It was a terrifying moment, a clear warning that the risk was real. But when he later signed with Ignatia in Albania, the dream called to him once more. He removed the device that had saved his life and decided to trust his body. He wanted to play without limits, without fear. And for a time, it seemed to work. He scored goals. He smiled again. Fans celebrated his resilience. When he found the net twice in a European qualifier for Ignatia in 2023, it felt like a redemption arc was unfolding, a man defying the odds, proving that courage could conquer fate. But fate had other plans. That November afternoon, as he lay on the pitch surrounded by medics, silence fell over the stadium. Players from both sides wept openly. The crowd watched in disbelief as the man who had fought so hard to keep playing was carried away for the final time. News News of his death spread within hours, first across Albania, then throughout Europe, and finally back to Ghana, where he was beloved as a symbol of perseverance. The following day, football matches across Albania were postponed. Clubs, players, and fans around the world paid tribute to him. His teammates remembered not just his skill, but his spirit, the warmth he brought to the locker room, the hope he gave to others facing their own struggles. In February 2024, Raphael Dwamena was laid to rest on a football pitch in Accra, Ghana, the same kind of ground where his story began. Surrounded by family, friends, and fans, he was buried with his boots and his jersey, a man who lived and died for the game he loved.